pass or kick the ball. This game is for us all. From Seattle down toward the Keys, this game is you, this game is me. Cats, dogs, and steer, even a tree. This game is America, so sing it loud with me. College football forever. College football forever. Downtown LA, Starkville City. 1 week you're up next, take a dip. Run the rock or let it rip. This game is America. All say, can you sing it with me?
We just stepped on her face with a hot-tail boot and broke her nose. Whoa, Nelly!
College football forever. College football forever. College football forever. College football forever.
College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
Oh, it's the glorious anthem that brings us into every installment of JC and Morgan. This one's a little extra special. It's the first one of 2025. Happy New Year, everybody, to the show that is on campus 52 weeks out of the year. All right, maybe 51. We missed a little time there with the holidays and my play-by-play schedule and everything that JC's got going on, not to mention some people getting sick, including our fearless producer, Mad Dog Phil Mullinax. You don't see him, but he's there. He's making the magic happen behind the scenes. Our sponsors help make the magic happen each and every time we do this magnificent program, including MG&A Wealth. For all your financial needs, go to mgawealth.com. Talk to Sean today. Could be the best conversation you have for you and your family's future. The future of college football comes down to the first ever Final Four in this format. Technically, we've had four, but this is a format that obviously is new to everybody, much like we anticipated, JC. It hasn't been without its flaws. The seating is going to be fixed. I don't think there's any question about that. You will not see a Boise State or Arizona State get a bye week and all the other things that have kind of been a little bit upside down. The seating, if you just looked at it and you said, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, all like you'd think that this was just a bunch of massive upsets. But actually, it's been the opposite. It's been very predictable in a lot of ways. The favorites have won every game but one. So many of the games have been blowouts. Yes, we've had a couple of classics. But overall, I know there are some that just are never going to be happy. And for those of you, I wish you the ability to find some happiness somewhere in 2025. You might have to search a little bit harder than others. I have enjoyed every bit of it. I think it's going to be tweaked, but I'm so excited, and I'm excited about this Final Four at teams that earned their way there. Notre Dame and Penn State down in Miami, Ohio State and Texas down in Dallas. We've been waiting for these type of matchups. It's kind of funny, JC, where all the talk about the playoff being more inclusive and parity in college football and all this and that. You know what we have? We've got 4 blue bloods. We've got the second all-time winningest program at Ohio State at 975. Not far behind the Buckeyes, Notre Dame and Texas are at 960. And not far behind the Irish is Penn State at 942. So if you were looking for like a college basketball's version of Butler or George Mason or Wichita State, it still ain't happening in college football. The mighty powers that be are in this Final Four. The bowl game season it's still technically going on, but for the most part, it has come and gone. And I thought there were some hidden gems there too. In fact, I'll do a little under the radar and go back and revisit some of the more exciting performances there. and maybe even do a deep dive on a guy named Cam Skattebo, which is one of those names you're going to remember for a while, much like in the basketball tournament when you've got some kid who lights it up. Even though they don't win the national championship, you remember his name and what he was able to do for a couple of rounds. That was Cam Skattebo. He actually captured the nation. So we'll get to all of that. We will lay down all the latest in college football news. And with all of that in a way of a lengthy intro, I say good morning to our editorial North Star, J.C. Shurburtt.
Hello, Mike. Happy New Year to everybody out there. Great to be back talking college football on J.C. and Morgan. Lots happened since we last left you guys, including a couple of rounds of playoffs. It's not lost on me that the format. Okay, I think that obviously the selection process has to change. That, as my opinion, is not changing on that based on stupid bowl records or results of this very flawed bracket. I'm just gonna say the selection process sucked, but we got the outcome that was probably predictable. The Penn State had for a team that hadn't really accomplished much this year, other than handling their business against underdogs. It was a pretty as easy as it can be in this format. I think that they crapped all over the Big 12 for no reason this year. I think Arizona State was a really good football team. Talent-wise, player for player, they probably do not belong on the same field as Texas. But you saw what happened. I mean, that's not a team void of talent. That's a good team. You mentioned Skattebo, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on him. What a spirited performance for a program that really, man, it seems like yesterday we were talking about the Herm Edwards disaster, and here comes 30-year-old Kenny Dillingham in there, and all their players left. I mean, people forget Daniels, who won the Heisman at LSU, was at Arizona State for a year.
Right.
He was their quarterback, and
threw passes to a first-round draft pick wide receiver that wound up at Florida.
Yes, Pearsall.
I mean, they had talent.
And you think about too that when Jaden Rashada left, everybody's like, oh, and then all of a sudden he's on the move again. Kind of funny how sometimes the guys that have this.
That is like the poster child. That is everything that's wrong with a kid getting bad advice and outside noise. And all the coaches talk to us about this. It's not the kid that typically is the problem. Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
It's the people around him. And clearly he is getting massively bad advice on a regular basis.
Malachi Nelson.
Right.
Those
the
guys,
defensive lineman you always talk about?
Bear Alexander.
Alexander. Yeah.
Oregon took him. So
there you go.
I have a lot of respect for Dan Lanning, although I do think he's still a guy that's been anointed maybe before his time, because he's not doing anything different than Chip Kelly and Mark Helfrich and Mario Cristobal did at Oregon. It's nothing different. There's still 10, 11 wins. I like him though, and I don't want to come down on him hard. I just would not have taken him. I would not have. I mean, and it's going to take coaches doing that. Somebody's going to take a gamble on Rashada, and somebody's going to pay him. But I don't know. It probably needs to be a program like one of the Texas schools, and just have a bunch, sitting around. I just don't know. I think that, but I think with back to the playoff, how it played out, kind of tells us, and I believe that I'm not mad at them for this format. When it was on paper, Mike, we were like, oh, great. It's super, better than nothing. But nobody anticipated the way they would rank the teams. Okay. Nobody anticipated they would be married to this 1-loss, 2-loss thing. And they are. Because otherwise, I can't look at just because the Big 12 was competitive and the ACC had 3 decent teams and the rest were top heavy does not necessarily mean you're a better league. I mean, I think there's something to say about depth. You can compare teams to teams. I don't think anybody's as good as Ohio State. But I don't think the Big 10 is a better conference than the SEC top to bottom. The SEC goes about 8, 9 deep with quality teams. And people mentioned the bowl record. Good for Michigan, good for Illinois, good for Southern Cal. But man, they didn't go through what Ole Miss went through this year, any of those teams. So I still contend the process needs to change. The seeding, though, I think is the more egregious looking deal because you had teams like Boise State seeded third. That really never made sense.
Silly.
Because again, it gets back to the way they rank them. But then the format kind of put them in a box, right? Because they had to be third, even though Boise was ranked 10th or 11th, they had to be third because they were ahead of Arizona State for whatever reason. And so I'm pretty sure that's going to change. I'll also say this: it's not lost on me that every team that had the layoff, which we all thought, well, that's good because they could rest up and stuff. I think I was wrong about even saying that was a good thing, Mike, because I'll tell you this. There's a big difference between a 10-day layoff in football and a month.
Mm-hmm.
A month where you have breaks for exams. It's like playing an opening game of a season in a lot of ways. And it's not lost on me that every single team that had the bye lost. I mean, Georgia, I thought the rest would do them good. Notre Dame was a lot sharper in that game. Now we could say Gunnar Stockton or whatever, that was a reason. And man, if I were a Georgia fan, what a horrible trip to New Orleans. I mean, prayers out to Kirby Smart and his family losing his dad like that, and then the tragedy that happened down there.
Amen, yeah.
I mean, that's just awful. But it did not surprise me Notre Dame won. I thought it would be probably – I thought Georgia would score about 10 more points to be like a 23-20 game. But I did a little video, a JC and Morgan solo prediction of the quarters, if you will, on YouTube. I nailed every one of them.
Did you?
I know I don't normally do that because it was just like, well, that these teams, they're a little more warmed up and stuff like that. So, and I thought too, Arizona State would cover the 13, and they did. So I think that the layoff, and I've said this for a while, I think the home games were such great spectacles, regardless of who should have been in them. I mean, those were pretty even Penn State at noon, those were big deals. And I think more teams are going to be like, is it really a reward? Because we've got 10 days off between conference championships and the first round, or 9 in some cases. Is it really a reward to shelve our football team for a month and then go to a bowl against a team that won a game 10 days ago against probably a good opponent, and they're a little more sharper and in routine? That's an interesting question. So I do expect the format to get tweaked this year, the seeding process. There's already talk about that. And then I think we'll see some big changes for 2026, but because contractually they're not really allowed to make a bunch of changes, or they'd have to all agree. And that's
every conference. Yeah.
It's like Congress passing something.
Right.
So, but I do think common sense will prevail with this seeding thing. I thought the intent was good, but I think it actually works against teams in some ways to have that layoff.
Agreed. I think that's certainly going to be tweaked. And I mean, look, we talked about it at the top when the bracket came out. I'm not saying Oregon's the best team in college football, but they kind of got screwed. Like that your reward for being the one undefeated team and the number one is that you play Ohio State, which we've known for a while is the most talented roster. And this is the other thing, and this kind of touches upon your background as a national evaluator of talent, JC, and that now, in addition to there's just more out there, there's more tape, there's more 7-on-7 clinics and everything else to better evaluate the 17-year-olds. You're still going to miss, but the hit ratio is better than it's ever been. But then you have the portal, which makes everybody a lot smarter in evaluating talent, because you're not breaking down high school film, you're breaking down actual college film. So it doesn't take a genius. If somebody hands me $20 million to just go and fish for players predominantly in the portal, as Ohio State did, I'm going to come up with a pretty damn good roster. If it's not the best in college football, it's going to be really close. And I watch Ohio State play, and I'm just like, how in the world did they lose a game? They're so loaded everywhere. That's your super team. I don't know if they're going to win this thing. I don't know if they're going to beat Texas. But in a year where all year long we've been talking about there might not be a true dominating team, Ohio State has a dominating roster.
Yeah, there is, and I'll say this: it's that's the 20 million too. The reason they weren't dominant. I mean, that Michigan game, that roster is going to get up for the playoffs. It's the playoffs. It's like college basketball. I compare this Ohio State team, Mike, in a lot of ways to the 1995 Arkansas Razorbacks in basketball. Do we remember that team with Scotty Thurman and Corliss Williamson? They won it all the year before with Bill Clinton and the Stads and Charlotte pulling for his Hogs. They beat Duke. That was a go. Calling the Hogs in the old Charlotte Coliseum. It was amazing. And so then the next year they got everybody back. They're number one. Clearly number one. They piddled around and this, that, the other. I think they finished about like 22-9. Got a 6th seed. And then all of a sudden in the daggum tournament, they turned it on. They did not lose until Seattle, the finals, and they happened to run in to the best UCLA team they've had since John Wooden and Ed O'Bannon, who's caused a lot of these issues we talk about now in college football. But I tell you, it's that's who they remind me of, is that type of turn it on, turn it off. And they're good enough to do that. And but like it's a totally different story when you have a $20 million roster and a lot of guys from all over. Luckily for them, the nucleus of that program is still top Ohio football talent. But when you're piecing together do they really want to get their brains beat in by Michigan for 4 quarters? No. And there was some criticism of Ryan Day in that game. It's almost like Ohio State wanted to line up and out tough them, right? Those guys, they're not going to play that game. I mean, I'm not saying they don't care, but when you have a roster you assemble like that, sure, it's set up for a playoff run. And they're lucky because they were one terrible offensive coordinator who had a bad series inside the 5, which he's done his entire career, and luckily was demoted, from losing at home to Nebraska and not making the playoff at all. That game was closer than it should have been.
Very close, yeah.
But they can turn it on, so that's good. So as long as you can make it in, I think maybe you can have games. I mean, it's going to piss off your fan base if you lose the rivalry game every year. But
that's not good. And I don't know how you trade it for that game. I mean,
I think
they were up for it. They just got beat. And that's where Ryan Day, I'm convinced if there wasn't a 12-team playoff, he would have been fired on the spot.
Yeah. Oh, no, there's no question. None of these teams we have left would have been in the 14.
Isn't that crazy? And what does that tell you for all those that say, well, we had it right. We were getting the best teams with the BCS. No, you weren't. You were being told those were the best teams.
Yeah. And there's a lot of bad takes out there about, this is just a team playing the best right now. And I'm like, well, every other sport has a playoff. I mean, what are we going to go college basketball, man? Are we going to go back to, you remember when Wisconsin beat that great Kentucky team in the Final Four?
Oh, yeah.
To use a basketball analogy? Okay, well, Kentucky didn't win the national championship there. We're just going to go back and give them the national championship now?
Right.
Is that what the point is? Are we going to go give the Patriots the year they got upset by Eli for the second time in the Super Bowl? We're going to go back and do that. I mean, it is what it is. God forbid Major League Baseball, the Braves would have how many World Series champs if we just crown the regular season.
Right.
That's why you have a playoff, and I think that's fair. And but they have to get the seeding. They have to get the selection and the seeding right.
It needs to be fixed. There's no doubt that needs to be fixed.
And this guy in the chat box says dominant roster does not mean dominant loyalty, which is what wins. Yeah, and like in Georgia's situation. And Notre Dame too. Notre Dame's lost players due to injury as well. There's examples both ways, with it. And so maybe there is more than one way to win. I'm gonna say one more thing. I don't know whether it's Marcus Spears, Booker McThorpe, one of those LSU D linemen that talks. He was saying about this whole SEC is not dominant thing, right? Well, it used to be that your third teamers in the SEC could go start anywhere, be in the NFL. And now that the transfer portal's here, that's not happening. That was only at Alabama and Georgia for 2 years. I think some of these hot takes about the SEC are much more about, Mike, the fact that we had a 17-year dynasty, which we had not had in our lifetimes.
Correct.
And a guy that had the third team guy that could play in the NFL and start everywhere because he outsmarted everybody else and out recruited everybody else and out developed everybody else. He's gone. He's on game day now, slapping his knowledge down like Waffle House hash browns. Okay. It's that delicious, right?
Delicious.
And if you can't see that guy is different and a genius and he's not at Alabama or anywhere in the league anymore. And then Kirby had a mini run, kind of like LSU, Southern Cal, some of those teams like we normally do, then I think you're missing the boat. Nothing's changed as far as how good the SEC is. They just your days of having an Alabama are over. They're over. You can't sustain it unless you're a genius, which he was, and that guy's not going to come along but every so often.
Right, and I'm not sure if Georgia can sustain it either. And I have the world of respect for Kirby Smart, and like you said, thoughts and prayers to his family losing his dad, a longtime coach, and kind of his inspiration to get into that profession. But Georgia now is showing some chinks in the armor. They're still going to be really good. I mean, they're not going anywhere, but it is harder to stack players. I don't think the SEC's gone in, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I know we got to take a break. I know we're going to get to the JC5, and this might be in the JC5, the first JC5 of 2025. But the narrative, I knew this was out there. I didn't realize it was out there to this degree. And a lot of these are my coworkers at the Four Letter Network. I know a lot of these people. They're good people, but and then I know a lot of the people at Fox too. We've gotten to this point where the Fox people are in bed with the Big Ten and have nothing to do with the SEC, so they can't wait to jump on anything that the SEC does not have going for it. And then you have other people with like the ACC that they're tired of hearing how bad the ACC was to the tune of 2-11 in bowl games. And so they're throwing out some stuff. It's just like I knew for lack of a better word, jealousy and envy of the SEC was a thing, but it was on full display over the last couple weeks. By the way, Texas is an SEC team. It's still in the Final Four, but and the SEC went 8-6. It's not like they went 2-12. They went 8-6. But what did it for a lot of people is Tennessee got smoked. Georgia lost to Notre Dame, and then those kind of under the radar SEC, Big Ten, South Carolina loses to Illinois, a double-digit favorite. Not many people saw that coming. Alabama loses to Michigan. Again, you get Jalen Milroe to play, and he lays another egg to the tune of 3 turnovers in the first quarter. I can't wait to see where that kid is drafted. He'll look great. He'll look great in his underwear, and he'll run well, and he'll do everything else. But goodness gracious, he was not good at all in the second half of the season. Ask any Alabama fan of that. But as you watched all that, the Wolves were out, JC. They were out. They were waiting and waiting. When can I tell everybody the SEC is overrated? I'm tired of these people talking about the SEC. I'm tired of watching the SEC dominate the sport for 20 years. Look, I get it. You want some fresh blood. Okay. And maybe a non-SEC team wins. Probably will. I mean, Texas is a 6.5-point favorite, underdog to Ohio State. And then whoever wins that, it's got Notre Dame, Penn State winning on the other. It's a gauntlet, whoever's going to win this thing. But it's not as if the SEC sucked out loud this year. Don't kid yourself, folks. Don't think that you're really closing the gap overall and the SEC is just about to fall apart. That ain't happening anytime soon.
The SEC was better this year than it has been, than it was last year when you had Georgia and Bama at the top that were clearly the 2 best teams in the entire conference. This is not like 2016. 2016 was a down year in the league. Alabama was good. They had a freshman quarterback, kind of cruised to the title. The next best team that went to the Sugar Bowl was an 8-4 Auburn team. They started 2 transfers in the conference at quarterback, Mike, from Purdue, 3 or 4 true freshmen. Meanwhile, the ACC had Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson. The list goes on and on and on. The kid that played at Pitt, Nathan Peterman, Daniel Jones, Mitch Trubisky. I mean, That's a lot. I mean, the ACC in 2016 plus Clemson won it. That was a banner year for them. I'll admit, in that year they were better. This year, it was just Nick Saban retired. It was just as difficult. There were just as many good teams. And bowl games, look, people are like 2-9 in bowl or whatever they were, 2-10, whatever the ACC was in bowls or postseason.
2-11
didn't matter to me. I mean, the ACC was bad because you could tell they were bad.
Yeah, exactly.
You could tell they're these teams when you watch them play. You were like, well, Clemson's pretty good. Miami's pretty good on offense. So you have 1.5 teams in that league. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah,
and people forget too. They play an imbalanced schedule, just like they have 17 teams in that league. So Duke went 9-4, 9-3. Go look at their results week by week. I mean, Elon had them sweating in the opener. I mean, there's things you can tell as far as like, is a league up, is a league down. I think the Big 12 was probably up there right behind the Big 10 and SEC this year, but there was just not a dominant team. And we all knew that going in. Yeah. It made no sense to have the Big 12 champion behind, who actually had the most competitive game in the, behind the Boise States of the world, and even in the rankings behind like the SMUs of the world. And Indiana's offensive line, Mike, look at them compared to Michigan and Illinois on the offensive line.
Yeah.
There's a big difference. It's like the difference 100%. Between a pretty good college basketball team and the league you play in Atlanta physically. Yeah. And that's nothing against your league. There's nothing against your league, but you're 40-something years old. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That group, I looked at them because we put them up on the big screen at the crib because the wife's a Notre Dame fan. I finally got to look at them. I was like, holy cow. And they got abused.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think those are the things people need to pay attention to. Do bowls matter? Yes. Are bowls unpredictable? Yes. It's harder to pick those than it is to pick the playoff. Is it indicative of strength of conference? No. It's fun to keep up with, and
it's fun to keep up. But I mean, if we just did that, and I feel like I say this every year, if we just did this on bowl game winning percentage, the American's the best league in college football because it went 6-2. The MAC is the second best league in college football because it went 5-2, and then you'd have the Big Ten at 9-5 and the SEC at 8-6. That you can't deduct a whole lot of that, a whole lot from that. And I will just say this before we break: the biggest issue that's going to concern all these conference commissioners going forward is, and I don't know how you fix it. I've heard pods, I've heard everything else. The difference of conference schedule within the conference of one team versus another. You and I talked about it going all the way back to August, and it continued to be a thing. And the selection process and everything else, it's a big deal because the 8-game slate for a program like Georgia versus the one versus Missouri, the one for Indiana versus the one for Ohio State, like it's you're not dealing apples to apples, and clearly the committee could not tell the difference to save its life.
No, I mean, yeah, we talked about Tennessee getting beat, but man, I mean, and look, I respect them for winning a different way this year. They did not win as they have been winning under Josh Heupel. They won anyway with defense in the run game. But they didn't play LSU. They didn't play South Carolina. They didn't play Texas A&M. They didn't play Ole Miss. They did not play Missouri. That's 5 teams that probably would be lined favorites on their home field against that Vols team. And then they're having to go play Ohio State, the best roster in the country, at their place, even though Tennessee had 20,000 fans in the stands, which I applaud. And I'm not coming down on Tennessee. I'm just saying because they were 10-2. Oh, my God, 10-2. They got in. And these other teams did not because they play a little bit tougher. So you're right. At the conference level, that needs to be fixed, whether that's pods, whether that's point system, which I've advocated for, or whether that's playing a doubleheader in Atlanta, or dare I say a triple header with 2 playoff play-in games, and let the SEC play it off and control its own destiny with a set amount of bursts.
These are subjects we will certainly have plenty of time to chop up in the offseason as well. But first, when we come back, what better way to bring in 2025 with the first installment this year of the JC5? Back in a moment. Mike here for our friends at MG&A Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MG&A Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MG&A Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MG&A Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
Morning, Carl. Usual?
Yeah.
Your oldest was in here the other day. Said the two of you took a trip down to my neck of the woods. How'd that go?
You might as well give me one of those Carolina cars while you're at it.
I knew I liked that one.
Yeah.
There you go, my friend.
Thanks.
Hey, Carl. Congratulations.
See you tomorrow, Freddie.
You bet.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable. Because this movement is just beginning.
All right, welcome back. It is JC and Morgan. He is JC Shurburtt. I am Mike Morgan. Phil Mullinax, the Mad Dog, is our producer behind the scenes. I know most of you catch this show later. We were kind of a moving target sometimes, but we do record this live, and we will continue to do that. We'll try to be on a more consistent day and time with this off season and get there. But whether you're listening live or watching live or not, of course, we're on YouTube, Facebook, X, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, et cetera, et cetera. There were a couple of quick ones I'll get to, and then we'll get to the JC5, the Spurs Up. Mike, have you ever done any games with the great Billy Packer? No, I used to have him on my show from time to time, and always appreciated the job he did as an analyst back in the day. We've lost some great ones. I'm glad to see Dick Vitale's health is back. I have worked with him. I don't know what his plans are moving forward, but we're losing some of the people that I grew up with in terms of working or sadly, some of them have passed away. And, of course, main man Sam Murphy is trading places, a Christmas movie or just a movie that takes place during Christmas. Then, of course, Fiver or Dimer. That's a Ben Franklin Sam Murphy. I mean, that is whenever it's on. You're watching Winthorpe and Billy Ray navigate through an interesting winter. And, yes, it's a Christmas movie. Absolutely. That is, if it's on during Christmas, I am all in, but that's and we'll get back to Fiver or Dimer. I get a lot of people, JC, and still ask me, where'd Fiver or Dimer go? We'll start doing that now in the off season. We'll pick 3 movies each and every week. Fiver, if it's on, you've seen it at least 5 times. Dimer, 10. Neither means you're really not into it. You're not feeling the love. You're not feeling the vibe.
That's true. I've gotten into some TV shows, though.
Oh, can I just say, can I thank you and our man, Jamie Bradford?
For what?
Landman?
Oh, dude. Billy Bob Thornton's amazing.
Man.
Wow. Dude.
Wow. All I can say is thank you.
The
wife and I are hooked.
Oh, the dialogue's his character is unbelievable.
He's great in everything.
There's some kind of Varsity Blues Friday Night Lights-ish.
Yes.
Like it's shot like Friday Night Lights in a
Yes.
lot of ways. They go to Odessa Pyramid, actually, which, of course, Billy Bob Thornton was in that. But
Right.
But then, like, like they got the girl from Friday Night Lights, the whipped cream, girl.
bikini. No, that's from
she's
Varsity
the mom.
Blues.
From Varsity Blues. Yeah, that's her mom.
Right.
And it's still Texas. And then, okay, so Taylor Sheridan, because like I'll admit, I didn't watch Yellowstone. I didn't. I was. It's one of those I've been meaning to watch, and I'm going to get into it. So I discovered Taylor Sheridan, right? This guy that I've seen in movies before, and apparently, and I love, was it Sicario?
Oh, he was involved in that too?
He wrote it and directed it. He wrote it, yeah.
I saw that.
So
that's
apparently
great.
this guy's
great movie.
Amazing. All right, so I went through Lioness because Bradford, our co-host on the other show, has been talking about it. And I got through Lioness, and I'm caught up with that. And that season, and then there's another season coming. So I started watching Tulsa King with Sylvester Stallone.
Oh,
it is one of the best freaking shows I have seen in a long time.
Okay.
And Sly is in it, and he's perfect for the role.
Yeah.
And then they've got some other actors like Annabella Sciorra is in it as the aunt. Remember her from back in the day? She's in Jungle Fever, What Dreams May Come.
Oh, yeah.
She's in it.
Was she not in The Sopranos too for a bit?
She probably was.
Was she not one of Tony's love interests? I'll have to double check that. But anyway.
Maybe so. But I mean, it's Neil McDonough, who always plays the bad guy, but who's one of the best human beings in Hollywood. Kind of an albino looking dude. Always plays the bad guy, like always. You'll know.
Yeah.
You'll know Neil. He's in it. I mean, dude, it was like. I don't know, man. I mean, I guess I'm late to the Taylor Sheridan party, but I'm to the point where I almost celebrate his entire collection.
Yeah. That and Michael Bolton, of course.
Of course.
All right. We celebrate the JC5 as well.
It's time for the top topics in the sport. We bring the JC5. Number 1.
I don't know. We got some Michigan Wolverine fans out there that listen to our show.
Kudos, Justin.
And Justin, thank you for listening. Go Blue for you, just for you. And I'll say this. They did not have a good year on offense. They missed Jim Harbaugh. They missed a quarterback. They weren't very good. But I'll tell you this, Mike. My question for you is, because we got to do this Canadian parliamentary style. By the way, shout out Justin Trudeau. I'm glad you're resigning. Just to throw that in there for anybody that cares about Canadian politics. But in Canadian Parliament, you have to make a point. You can make a point, but you have to ask a question. It's like Jeopardy in a lot of ways. It's fascinating. If you like politics, watch Canadian Parliament live. They just gripe at each other in the form of asking questions. So it has to be in the form of a question. So my question for you, Mike, is even with all that happened with Michigan this year, how sweet is it for that program to end the year with wins over Ohio State and Alabama, regardless of what those teams
awesome.
Were like?
It makes you look a lot of the narrative. And I know when Justin does watch this, he will nod his head. The narrative was, is there any way Sharon Moore keeps his job? Like that was just, he was kind of getting that interim tag label, and they were allergic to the forward pass almost the entire season and just didn't, even games they were winning, they didn't look good. But now it's like, hey, all hail Sharon Moore. Eventually we'll have our guy at quarterback and we will throw the ball in front of the line of scrimmage to a guy in the same uniform, and he will catch the ball. I sound like the old Dan Fouts skit on Saturday Night Live when he was doing Monday Night Football. You see, the object is to throw the ball and then catch the ball and then run forward and pick up yards. I think that's going to be a big factor today. It's a huge. So often we are prisoners of the moment, and the moment for Michigan to win those last two games and to beat your in-state rival for a fourth straight year, and then. Look, say what you want about opt-outs and everything else. No excuses for the SEC teams that lost. There was no lack of motivation in those bowl games. If you watched them, for people like, well, the one thing about the playoff is now that we're expanding this thing, no one's going to give a crap at the bowl games. The guys aren't going to be motivated. No. Now, if you watch those games, the team, the one that Ole Miss played in where Duke didn't have its quarterback, that was just awful. You're going to have some stinkers. But for the most part, those bowl games that you watched around New Year's were really good and everybody was motivated, and Alabama sure as hell wanted to win, and Kalen DeBoer sure as hell wanted to win, and Jalen Milrose trying to enhance his draft stock and everything else. Michigan won it. It was a legit win. So go Maize and Blue. You got some momentum going into next year.
Same with Illinois against South
100%.
Carolina. They won the game, and same with Southern Cal beating or USC beating the Aggies, who by the way finished 8-5 again.
A rare close game, showing some chutzpah at the end for a Lincoln Riley team.
What's crazy, dude? They're 2-0 in Vegas against the SEC this season, but 7-6 overall.
7-6 overall.
Crazy stuff, man.
Yep.
Crazy stuff. But happy for those few Trojan fans that may catch us out there. You ended it the right way. If you're A&M, I don't know that ruins the first year under Elko. I think they're going to be fine. All right, let's get it on.
Number 2.
All right, man. I'm going to ask you something because I'm sure you are closer to this than me. Because if you turn on sports talk radio right here near the Windy City, we're in the Windy City TV market or media market. It's just going to be Bears, Packers, coach, Bears, Caleb, Bears. Everybody's elated because the Bears beat the Packers for the first time in like 12 years last night at Lambeau. Although the Packers did put their quarterback on the bench and lots of other things. So anyway, they still won. So a win's a win. So everybody, but you don't hear this. You may talk about Notre Dame a little. Definitely not Illinois or Northwestern. Whatever. But down in Atlanta, what is the vibe and what is your opinion on Georgia's quarterback situation moving forward? Did they miss Carson Beck, you think, against Notre Dame? Is Gunnar Stockton the answer? Just give me your take on the Georgia situation. I think anybody who thought Rashada was going to win the job is horribly misguided. No. But I do. Is there any question? I'll just say it. I like Gunnar Stockton. I think he's fine. But go ahead with you.
I think most fans think the way you just echoed. I think they look at Gunnar Stockton and they say, yeah, they were done with Carson Beck. There was nobody that I know, and I know a lot of Georgia fans, I'm surrounded by them here in Atlanta, that was thinking, if only we had Carson Beck for this game. Carson, there's a couple quarterbacks this year that lost a lot of money, and Carson lost more than any of them. You're talking about a guy that was on some boards the number one pick in the draft. Now he could be a mid-round guy. There's a lot of questions about him. He just did not perform well. Now, there are mitigating circumstances. Georgia, their receivers can't catch a cold. They led the country in drops. And what you saw in that game, and this goes to your question, the Gunnar Stockton's biggest mistake was at the end of the half, and people can criticize Kirby. I don't criticize him. I don't want to take a knee there. You go for points. But if the left tackle doesn't get beat like a drum, or if the running back just chips, that play doesn't happen. That, to me, is not a Gunnar Stockton issue. I thought Gunnar Stockton actually played pretty well. I thought when I watch Gunnar Stockton throw the ball, I see a kid that's got SEC arm talent. And, I think Gunnar Stockton's going to be fine. So, no, I think the buzz around here is less about, oh, no, what are we going to do with Gunnar Stockton next year or the quarterback situation? It's a little bit of, why are we not seeing more elite? Like, where's a Jeremiah Smith in a Georgia uniform, right? Where is what? How could the offensive line not be dominating every year at Georgia? Well, it's not dominating every year anywhere, quite frankly. But there's a little bit of oh, crap, we're never going to be as dominating on defense as we were in 2021, 2022. And that's a legit concern because I don't think you can stockpile players quite that way anymore. They're all going to be hitting the portal if they're not playing right away or if their NIL deal's not as much. So Georgia's still going to be really good. They're still going to be in the thick of it. But are we going to see a 3-year span like we saw where last year they easily could have been in the playoff and might have gone three-peat if they did get there? And the 2 years before that were two of the most dominating teams in our lifetime. I don't know if we're going to see that level of Georgia good in a while.
Number 3.
All right. By the way, on the Georgia receiver, Zachariah Branch and his twin brother are heading to Georgia from the transfer portal. Had a pretty good year the last 2 years. Caught 78 passes for about 800 yards at Southern Cal. So maybe that's an answer, but they brought in some talented guys from the portal before. So we'll see what happens there. Bill Belichick at North Carolina. That kind of became our last episode, I think an hour after we stopped talking here, it became official.
Right.
Your thoughts on that? I haven't read a whole lot about staff and things like that. What this is going to be a popular question. You're on in Atlanta on 680, you're on Sirius. You're going to get this question. So Mike, I'm actually prepping you for future questions on this.
Thank you.
Because this is going to be something people ask you the whole offseason.
Sure.
Your thoughts.
Oh, well, you mentioned 680 The Fan in Atlanta. I did shows right before the Falcons made their hire and then a few weeks after. And when I came back, I was like, wait a minute. You mean the Falcons had a chance at Bill Belichick, the GOAT, flawed in a character way? He's grouchy and blah, 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 and he's probably going to tell you how you should make every draft pick. Or you go with Raheem Morris? I'm not saying Bill Belichick was a slam dunk for the Falcons, but for the Falcon fans out there, you got what you deserved hiring Raheem Morris. Like, that's just laughable, and you saw his coaching chops on full display the last few weeks in Atlanta. So they don't get Belichick, and then I think Belichick looked at getting passed over by Atlanta a year ago and thought, even in this vicious cycle, and by the way, we're doing this show on Black Monday. There's going to be a lot of coaches fired today. He's already been a couple. Somebody must have told him, hey, there's no guarantee we're going to get a job here. And so Bill decided, let's give it a shot. I have no idea if this is going to work. I have no idea if Bill will last more than 2 years in Chapel Hill. But here's what I know. They have tried everything else. They have they have gone in-house. They have gone young. They have gone old. They have gone bring back the good vibe guy that did well 20 years ago. They tried everything. And the only constant has been North Carolina cannot get to that next level. So this is a caged animal. Let's just see if we throw something at the wall and see if it sticks, because nothing else is working for us. Deal. And they're obviously forking over a ton of cash in the process. If you read kind of the story that goes along with it, the amount of money they're going to spend on their quote-unquote front office, they're going to run it like an NFL team, which essentially is what we're turning into anyway. And they are going to spend more money than they ever had on players. So, look, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't think North Carolina all of a sudden is going to become the preeminent team in the ACC. But much like the Deion experiment at Colorado, I'm going to have a lot of fun watching it. And I don't blame them for giving it a shot.
And Deion, he turned it around. It was the best Colorado season they've had in a while. I mean, they obviously got their butts beat in the Alamo Bowl, but like I said, bowl games, the one thing I appreciated about Travis Hunter, the Heisman winner, he
played. So did Shurburtt.
He played, and he played his ass off the whole time. Yeah. They were getting their tail kicked.
No, that kid's a warrior.
And shout out to BYU and Kalani Sitake. What a great job they did this year.
That was a beatdown.
Yeah,
BYU beat
really
them down. Team. A motivated Colorado team beat them down.
Yeah.
I have questions. I want to see what Deion does, his coaching chops, when he doesn't have the best two athletes in the conference every week. Because you're about to lose Shurburtt and you're about to lose Travis Hunter. I know they'll go portal crazy again, and they're bringing in some high recruits and whatnot. But I think it's going to be a different looking Colorado next year. Because when you're playing in a league that's not that good top to bottom, and every week you've got the two best players in your league, you should win a good amount of games. You really should. You should have been in the Big 12 championship game, in my estimation. But that'll be fascinating to watch next year.
Number 4.
Cheer, cheer for old Notre Dame. I'm singing it so my wife can hear me. She hates when I talk about Notre Dame in a positive manner. because it jinxes it, she says. But, Mike, let's talk about Notre Dame, right? So this team's come a long dang way. And look, I kind of hit them on the schedule because the schedule wasn't that good. When you play 5 ACC games, none of them on the road, 2 service academies, and the worst teams in the Big Ten, plus Texas A&M, you really only have one good win in my estimation. However, beating Indiana has to be a solid win. And then beating Georgia speaks for itself because I didn't think anybody went through the gauntlet like Georgia. Carson Beck not being there, notwithstanding. I did not see an athletic difference, Mike. Speed, size, athleticism, strength, toughness, line of scrimmage, defense, you name it, corners, receivers, backs. I did not see a nickel's bit of difference athletically between the University of Notre Dame and the University of Georgia during that football game. And when it's easier to compare when they're playing each other and you see them side by side. And that surprised me a lot. Mm-hmm. Now, Notre Dame had some injuries. The Riley Norris guy, I think, or is that the guy that played at Alabama? The defensive lineman that was right that they lost.
Their best defensive player, yeah.
Yeah, they lost him. And then
right.
Howard Cross, the junior, Howard Cross, whatever. I don't know if he's related to the tight end Howard Cross. Anyway, he's hurt. He got hurt.
Riley Mills is who you were
Riley Mills, who's one of those big Northern Illinois 6'5", 280-pound dudes that can run. He's the type of guy you see play for the Packers with the barbed wire tattoos on their biceps on Sundays when it's 10 degrees. That dude's good.
Yeah.
So without him, but they're fast. Jeremiah Love's. Georgia would love to have Jeremiah Love, and as fast as that guy is. Yeah. They're for real. We've come a long way since that Northern Illinois loss, and they just keep on keeping on, Mike. I know I would call Ohio State the favorite. I think Texas can match Ohio State player for player talent wise, but this Notre Dame team, are we maybe seeing one of those kind of teams of destiny types of situations that we frankly have not seen in South Bend since '88?
Possibly. Look, when I watched them, and I was just as cynical as you were. Again, the Northern Illinois. If Notre Dame somehow wins this thing, the Northern Illinois loss will go down as the worst loss ever for a national champion in college football.
Agreed.
I mean, think about that. You don't see that happen. That in basketball, that can happen.
Oh yeah,
you can have a quad 4 loss on a bad night where they hit a bunch of threes and you don't show up to play, and that happens. But in college football, Northern Illinois wasn't even good in the MAC. You lose that game at home, which was 2 years after you lost to a Marshall team at home. They had some unexplainable losses in South Bend. But when I watch this Notre Dame, you have to eliminate the stereotype of previous Notre Dame teams, which is, pretty good on offense, big, strong offensive linemen and tight ends, but they've got too many thick ankles on D, right? That was the old feeling.
Brian Kelly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you watch that defense for Notre Dame, that ain't thick ankles.
That's SEC level.
Those are SEC linemen. Those are SEC linebackers. Those are SEC guys in the secondary.
And I'll throw this in there, Mike. I don't know that their passing game is what I would call elite on offense. Riley Leonard's good, but what he can do with his legs, he's kind of like if he were at Ohio State, he'd be doing the same thing that kid's doing, right? Throwing and passing. But they don't have what Ohio State has on the perimeter on offense.
No,
but
nobody does.
But they're very sneaky. They're very opportunistic. And that guy, Riley Leonard's a tough SOB.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known that since he played at Duke and beat Clemson on Labor Day night with just guts and guts and nuts and bolts. I mean, that guy's good.
Guts and nuts.
Basketball player from the state of Alabama that David Cutcliffe found. Go figure. Cutcliffe knows what he's doing sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that guy's good, and he's a difference maker. Now, I do think Penn State has a lot of great athletes as well. I don't think they're a slow plodding team either. So we'll see what happens in the Orange Bowl. But I was just thoroughly impressed. I was impressed with what they did to Indiana. I expected it, though. I didn't think Indiana was very good. But what they did to Georgia, nobody but Alabama's done anything like that, close to even the games Georgia's lost under Kirby. I guess Ole Miss kind of got after them and Alabama in the first half this year. But there's just not a lot of teams that do that to Kirby Smart coach teams. And I didn't think it was just their night and that Georgia just played bad. I thought they were better across the board.
Notre Dame is like the 2009 Nick Saban Alabama team. With all due respect to Greg McElroy, who we've had on this show, he wasn't throwing the ball all over the field. Remember when Nick first got to Alabama before he hired Lane Kiffin and started bringing in guys like Tua and throwing it all over? They were a ground and pound, throw when you need to, defensive dominated, shrink the game, beat up people and win. And that was the formula. And that's this year's Notre Dame team. They're not looking for offensive fireworks. There's not going to be a highlight reel of Riley Leonard passes downfield. They're winning the other way. And so far, it's worked for them pretty well.
Number 5.
All right, number 5. Mike, did you realize that this Texas-Ohio State game is game 1 for at least one of the teams of 2 straight games against the other team?
Help me follow that again. It's game 1.
Game 1 of 2 consecutive games against their opponent. Because the loser, their season's over, and the next season, 2025, in that awesome weekend of college football where I know I'll be chilling in your hot tub watching this game on the back porch in the ATL with a cold one in my hand. That great weekend open, and we have a really good opening weekend next year.
Yeah,
it's not like this past year. Texas plays Ohio State in Columbus to open the 2025 season.
I hadn't thought of that until you brought it up. So that did not occur to me because I'm so just locked into these next few days. But you're absolutely right. That is a good little 2025 scheduling tidbit. And you're right. Week 1 is awfully good. There's a lot of good. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing now, and I hope we don't get away from that in spite of the way the committee selected its teams this year, where 3's bigger than 2 and 2's bigger than 1, so clearly that's who we take. Unga bunga.
Micah, who's going to write a manifesto in the chat box about the state of college football, he did say, and I agree with a lot of what he said. I'd have to kind of dig into it. He's making a lot of granular points that I can't like wrap my mind around while I'm sitting here blabbering to you guys. But you are making good points. He did say something about it's not the playoff, it's the who has the easiest schedule tournament. And in many ways, it was when you look at the strength of schedule numbers.
That is look. I know Mike and I disagree. He loathes the playoff, and I do think it's a good thing. But I do think where I would agree with Mike and anybody else, the selection process has to be different, and we have to learn from the mistakes of this year. Now, what didn't help matters is that the 3-loss teams from the SEC that we were, kind of campaigning for, 2 of them did not play well at all in their bowl game. That didn't help matters. But nevertheless, neither did Indiana, getting pantsed and clearly looking like a team that did not belong on the same field as some of the teams that were in that playoff. I mean, we have to learn from that. Now, Arizona State's on line 2 saying, hey, guys, look at us. We were a couple of controversial calls away from winning that game. And, I mean, so look, you don't always get the definitive answer because it's not just who's the most talented team that wins every game. That's why we have a thing called upsets. It's not just the Vegas favorite that wins every game. That's why we have upsets. Now, most of the favorites won in this playoff. In fact, all but one. And we've had blowouts. We got blowouts in the NFL playoffs. You watch the NFL playoffs this weekend, you're going to have a couple blowouts. That's just what happens. But I think we got to do a better job of selecting teams.
I just think it's a matter of moving away from the old way of like I call it being married to the polls system. a slave to the pole, which is kind of describes some of my ex-girlfriends, but that's a different subject. It's they want to put it in order like the old way. Well, the old way, there was no good way to do it if you're just going to pick the top 2 or 4 teams at the end, other than saying unga bunga, 2 lost, better, worse than you lose 2, you're out. Well, the reason we went to 12 is to factor in strength of schedule. I'll remind everyone the minute this got announced or they were talking about it happening, they're going to go to 12 to 16 teams. Every college football schedules are set years in advance, sometimes decades. Everybody immediately in the SEC, at least, started scheduling up. Alabama's got a schedule in a couple of years where they play Ohio State and Notre Dame back to back to open the season and then play 8 SEC games. I mean, everybody starts scheduling up because they knew, oh, well, it's not going to hurt us. If we're good enough, we can get in with 2 or 3 losses. So to sit there and just automatically say, the old way is what matters, it kind of goes against the spirit of, I think, expanding it. I mean, I don't care what happened in the Cheez-It Bowl or the used to be the Outback Bowl or the Vegas Bowl or whatever. I could care less what happened. You can't tell me South Carolina, Alabama, Ole Miss in those games. And I'll even say now that Tennessee, I mean, I maybe those teams don't compete with Ohio State. I don't know. I think a case could be made. 2 of them were better than Tennessee. But you can't tell me those teams would not have been more competitive than Indiana and SMU. Which were the 2 big points of contention,
no doubt,
in that thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. All right, when we come back, we'll do a little under the radar, some of the things that were interesting coming out of those other quote unquote bowl games, and a deep dive on the sensation that was and is Cam Scattaboo. It is JC and Morgan, presented by MG&A Wealth for your family's financial needs. Go to mgawealth.com. Talk to Sean. Give him a call, 954-289-9000, 954-289-9000. Could be the best phone call you make in 2025. We'll wrap things up on the other side. JC and Morgan. Mike here for our friends at MG&A Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MG&A Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MG&A Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MG&A Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
Morning, Carl. Usual?
Yeah.
Your oldest was in here the other day. Said the 2 of you took a trip down to my neck of the woods. How'd that go?
You might as well give me one of those Carolina cars while you're at it.
I knew I'd like that one.
Yeah.
There you go, my friend.
Thanks.
Hey, Carl. Congratulations.
See you tomorrow, ready?
You bet.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
Right, it is the final segment. Again, Happy New Year, and we say it all the time, and we'll say it more because we truly mean it. We thank you for choosing us. We know there's a lot of noise out there, a lot of shows popping up Anybody with a microphone at Best Buy and a laptop can claim they do a podcast, and that's great. But I think we've established ourselves here over a period of time where a number of you hopefully enjoy what we're saying, whether you agree, disagree, or what have you. At least enjoy the show, and we can't say enough about the great comments that we get about how much you guys enjoy it. We'll keep doing it as long as people enjoy it, and we enjoy the postseason. I wanted to do a couple quick things, JC, in this final segment, and then get some final thoughts. These are some of the under-the-radar things that I watched and picked up on that I think are worth mentioning because they get lost in the shuffle. We're going to be dominated by playoff talk the rest of the way. Army football, they won their bowl game 12-2. By the way, they won their bowl game completing 2 passes. But how about the service academies? Army finishes 12-2. Navy won their bowl game. They completed 7 passes in their win. They win 10 games to finish 10-3. So the service academies, Army and Navy, all due respect to Air Force, I can't tell you off the top of my head what they did. But Army and Navy combined for 22 wins.
I'm going to say this too about Navy, because we talked about a lot about Army this year because Navy was the first team to get slaughtered by Notre Dame. And so we stopped talking about them and they didn't make the American title game. But Navy finished the year with wins against Army, which is everything, a big win against Army, and against Oklahoma. I mean, I know Oklahoma wasn't that good, but you close your eyes and say Navy's going to win the Army-Navy game and then go beat Oklahoma in a bowl.
Yeah,
that's big for the midshipmen. Winning Army-Navy's enough, but then anytime you can go get a scalp like Oklahoma when you're a service academy, I think things are going well.
100%. Jim Mora Jr., UConn coach. Look, they wind up winning their bowl game. That's the second bowl game in 3 years since. I mean, you have to realize just how big of a dumpster fire UConn football was. There was serious talk that they were just going to take their ball and go home and get rid of it, going back to COVID and the way that was handled. And it just looked like they were not interested in playing college football anymore. And all of a sudden they decided, no, let's go ahead and try to be competitive. Jim Mora Jr. was a guy that's still a bad name in Atlanta for the way he left the Falcons. Did not go great at UCLA. When the hire was made, it was like, that's kind of a reach, but whatever. He's done a really good job. He's 26-22. He's 1-1 in bowl games. And again, he's actually made UConn relevant again.
And they're an independent. I mean, who's an independent these days? Look, Jim Mora Jr., UCLA fans, I don't know, there's about like on average 0.8 of you out there that listen to this. 46-30 at UCLA. 4 bowl games his first 4 years. Recruited very well. They dipped in 16 to 4-8. And then at 5-6, heading out toward the end, he was fired before their season finale. I think after he lost Southern Cal. They just had 2 down years. Other than that, 9-5, 10-3, 10-3, 8-5, and they finished ranked 16th and 10th in 2013 and 2014. That's the best anybody's done at UCLA consistently those 4 years. In quite some time, maybe since like Terry Donahue, maybe. Carl Durrell didn't do that. Chip Kelly didn't do that. And of course, Chip Kelly replaced him, and we now know Chip Kelly's an offensive coordinator at Ohio State. I've always thought he was a good coach. Bad fit with the Falcons. I was in Atlanta at the time working in the media, the newspaper business when he was hired to replace Dan Reeves. Just what he tried to do on offense with the Greg Knapp West Coast system with Michael Vick was never going to work. Still, they went to the NFC Championship game one year. Mm-hmm. I think they lost to the Eagles and left, and it wasn't in good shape. Then the Seahawks one year was a disaster because I think he kind of got promoted.
Yeah,
but because he went on the air and talked about how he wanted the University of Washington Huskies job. Never got that job, but he's with the East Coast Huskies now. And look, man, I just think I don't think this is a bad hire, and I think when we talk about programs and coaches and the portal and front offices and general managers and all this stuff, You wait. He keeps doing what he's doing at UConn. He's going to get back in somewhere. Some program with resources is going to hire him because the guy can coach.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good coach.
Yeah.
He's just the situation. He's made mistakes like most coaches and then paid for them. And then at UCLA is not a program that necessarily, necessarily does all that well. And so I think that I think you watch this guy. If he keeps doing what he's doing, he'll surface somewhere that's surprising, maybe in our neck of the woods.
Spencer Danielson, Boise State head coach. He's 36 years of age. He is a former linebacker at Azusa Pacific. If that sounds familiar, that's where Christian Okoye, the Nigerian Nightmare, once played football. He's a California guy, born in Salina Beach. Never been there. He takes over as the interim coach of Boise State in 2023, 16-2. He's the reason why Ashton Jeanty stayed, even though there were NIL offers on the table to go elsewhere. You listen to him speak, and he's a likable guy and a guy that's, I think, destined to be one of the more successful coaches around. So Spencer Danielson, remember that name. He's no longer flying under the radar. And I would conclude with kudos to some Group 5 teams that scored wins over the Power 4 and bowl games. Memphis beat West Virginia. Toledo beat Pittsburgh in 6 overtimes. Navy, as you mentioned, beat Oklahoma. UConn and the Fighting Jim Moras beat North Carolina. And ECU beat NC State 26-21, a game that ended in a brawl. And those two teams are going to open up the season in 2025. Good luck for some sportsmanship in that one. Finally, just a deep dive on Cam. Is there anybody that wasn't loving what they saw to Cam Skattebo for Arizona State? A kid looks like a rugby player. They list him at 5'11", about 220. I don't know what his actual weight is. It feels like it's bigger than that. Where did this kid come from, you might ask? Well, he was born in Rio Linda, California, played at Rio Linda High, ran for 3,500 yards, 42 touchdowns, under-recruited as a high school player. JC would have given him 4 stars, but these other clowns, they completely overlooked him. He committed to play for Sacramento State. That's right. He was a fighting hornet in the Big Sky.
State.
Yeah, Sac State. Remember they had the big upset a couple years ago in college football. So in 2022, he rushes for 1,300 yards. He's named the Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year. Then he goes into the portal, and here's Arizona State, and they're a train wreck at the time. The whole Herm Edwards thing blowing up in Sun Devil's face. He comes over there, and I'm sure people are looking at this kid like, are you serious? He's not a running back. And what does he do? Well, in his first year, he starts 7 games, runs for 783 and 9 touchdowns. And this year, starts all 13, runs for 1,700 yards, 21 touchdowns, catches 45 balls for 605 yards and 3 more touchdowns. And in that memorable Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, 271 total yards, 143 rushing, 86 receiving, and 42 passing. And in a losing effort, named the Peach Bowl's offensive MVP. Pretty damn cool, and one of the better stories of this bowl season thus far.
I have to agree. Played for current Stanford coach Troy Taylor at Sac State.
That's right.
By the way, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. Troy Taylor, excuse me. Troy Taylor was the quarterback at Cal in the mid-'80s when I started following football, and I got Street and Smiths and all that good stuff. He was featured in those magazines. He was really one of the better quarterbacks in Cal Bears history. When he got the Stanford job, it just didn't register that was that Troy Taylor. It's kind of a name, but played for Troy Taylor there, who had a outstanding run at Sac State. Tough situation at Stanford, but that guy could evaluate talent. So, yeah, look, man, hats off to Cam Skattebo. I mean, and the dude was sick on top of that.
Yeah.
You know, he's throwing up on the
puking up,
flu.
yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
right there in that stadium, dude, I was so happy for Arizona State fans. I know they lost. I know it was targeting. If there is a targeting penalty, that was targeting.
100%.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's no question about it. I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but
I know what they were thinking. It's the same people that say call a basketball game one way for 38 minutes, but in the final 2, let them play. Well, that's not the way the rules don't say let them play and just change the rules in the final minute of a football game.
Especially
it's clearly
not
targeting.
like that. I mean, because they went to, I don't know if it was Matt Austin or who during the broadcast. They went right to him. It's like, oh, yeah, defenseless player led with his helmet-to-helmet contact. Definitely targeting.
Easy call.
And then there was no call. And I was like, holy dog poo. I mean, but anyway.
Yeah.
So that's my take on that. But that's I was telling my wife about the legend of Cam Scatterboo. It's like William Wallace. I shall tell you the story of Cam Scatterboo.
Of Cam Scatterboo. Here was a man. No, it was great stuff, and one of the better moments in the postseason thus far. Do you have any predictions on these final 2 games?
I'm going to go with Notre Dame. It's this type of game Penn State loses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think Notre Dame is playing very confidently, and they're focused. And when these guys focus, they're pretty good. Now, it's not to say Penn State can't beat them. I think it'll be a heck of a game down there in Miami. And then I got to go with Ohio State. But man, that game is in Dallas, and I know Ohio State travels, but they don't travel like Texas, man. And it's in Dallas.
Yeah,
I mean that's basically a home game for the Longhorns at Jerry World. There's gonna be a lot of burnt orange in that stadium. So, I mean, if Texas has the players to match them player for player, but I don't. Will it happen? Who knows? I mean, I think whatever quarterback plays worse, that's who's going to lose the football game.
Yeah. I'm feeling a possible Big Ten final, but I'm just hoping for 2 really good games. That's all I care about at this point.
Yeah. And by the way, Sheriff, this is not this is the wrong show.
Yeah, we'll
That's
the other show will be on in the second, Sheriff, and
coming on a second. So
thank you so much.
Thank you so
for
much.
Following along, and that's a good way to say goodbye, everybody. That's going to do it for us on the first JC and Morgan, the first of many throughout this offseason and throughout 2025. For our producer Mad Dog, for JC, Mike saying so long, everybody. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you next week.